On April 23, 2012, the trial started and William Balfour maintained his innocence for the 3 murders, and he claimed that the police planted evidence on him just so they could take him in. Now, his defense attorney claimed that the only reason the police were so swift about arresting him was because the victim's sister was Jennifer Hudson and they didn't properly investigate the killing. For instance, not only was Jason Hudson, the brother, a known drug dealer, he lived in the Inglewood area and he had been shot by someone in the past. They said that missing this type of information could have played a vital role in their death. Now, William came from a family that endured many years of violence, incarceration, and drug use. His grandmother went to prison for killing her boyfriend who allegedly abused her, and his aunts and uncles were heavy drug users. He didn't have much to do with his father because he was locked up in prison for murder as well. His mother, Michelle Ball, physically abused him and his brother, and after a while, she eventually gave up and allowed the state child welfare to take custody. Now, as William got into his teen years, he spent a lot of time in and out of correctional facilities after joining the Gangster Disciples, and then on November 29, 1998, 17-year-old William was spotted breaking into a brand new Chevrolet Suburban. When the owner saw him pulling off, he ran outside and jumped on top of the hood. The police were called immediately and William fled the scene with the guy still holding on for dear life. But after driving around for a few blocks, he crashed into a telephone pole, throwing the owner off and severely injuring him. The owner pressed charges, and this resulted in William being put in prison for attempted murder. Now, in 2006, he was finally released from prison, and while he was out in his old neighborhood one day, he ran into Julia Hudson, Jennifer Hudson's sister, who was an old classmate from school. Soon after this, the two started dating and eventually got married. Now, as some time went by, William, who had all this previous trauma, started to show his true colors. He began becoming jealous of anyone who showed attention to Julia. Not even 2 full years had passed since they had first got married, and the two eventually had to separate, with him being thrown out the Hudson household. Now, on October 24th, 2008, a day after Julia's birthday, William had stopped by the house, but when he came in, he noticed that she had some gifts that was from a new man she was talking to. This caused him to start yelling and arguing with Julia, but she didn't have time for all this mess because she had to get to work. Allegedly, around 9 a.m., William had come back to Julia's mother's house, fired a bullet through the door, which actually hit his mother. Then he burst into the door and shot her a second time, knocking her on the floor. Then he walks back to the bedroom where the brother was and fires 2 shots in the back of his head while he was asleep. By this time, Julian had come out the room to see what was going on because he heard the gunfire. So William grabs up the keys to his brother-in-law's SUV, picks up Julian and takes him to the vehicle. Then they take off down the street. Now, later on that day when Julia finally got off, she returned home and noticed that a bullet hole was in the front door. So she rushed into the living room only to discover her mother's lifeless body lying on the floor in a pool of her own blood. Julia then runs out the house screaming for her son, but after her son didn't respond, she asked a neighbor to go in the house to check and see what's going on. That neighbor walked in the house and came back out with the disturbing news that Julia's mother and brother were dead, but her son was nowhere to be found, and this is when she calls the police to put out an Amber Alert and to report the murder. For 3 days straight, police and investigators searched all throughout the area of Julia's son, but unfortunately, they wasn't successful. Luckily, on October 27, 2008, the police received a phone call from Lynette Loudon stating that her dog had been barking at this strange vehicle parked across the street from her home. Once the police arrived, unfortunately, Julian King's lifeless body was resting on the rear seat with his small hands protruding from under a dirty shower curtain.